but I think that the biggest challenge today is society.
But there's a fifth option. There is a community revolving around every single child that is incredibly important in their development, and that is their school.
Right? In a way, you're giving people a manual, right? And hey, this is what this is. This is like these are the things that you should be careful. But things are tailored to that specific person.
Yep.
They will not allow their kids to sleep in a friend's house because of
whatever.
If we are not in front. And usually it doesn't happen too much, to be honest, because I had that experience.
Anyway, all right, episode 3 of the Unleashed Pod, and I don't know what we're going to talk about today because Guillermo is the one who's going to be bringing either one of his ideas or one of his domains. So the floor is yours, Guillermo. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. Well, this came out of the box mainly. Last week, I was speaking with some parents that they had kids with autism, and they start sharing the problems they are facing. And suddenly we found that to get diagnosed with a neurodiversity, it takes between 3 to 5 years. And sometimes you don't even get the whole diagnosis. You just get a portion of that. So I start diving, speaking to them to understand all the problems they had. And you have autism spectrum disorder, ASD, but there's also attention deficit, hyperactivity disorders. Mainly those ADHD comes when you are in the teenage or even adults. I just found a friend of mine with 45 years old that he has been diagnosed with that. And looking how this has grown over. So I was curious. I say, we're in 2023. People should know more, at least from a medical perspective, about this and how to identify. But I was finding that in 2020, the Center of Disease Control and Prevention in the United States is the data that I could just grab. There was approximately 1 in 54 children that have been diagnosed with ASD. But when you compare back to 2012, it was like 1 in 88. So it looks like it's ramping up and we are finding more and more. And when I was diving, it's like, what are the steps you guys go through when you find that something is happening? And I want to really understand how I can help and serve my kids to be more inclusive and try to make their life easier. I found that they go through many, many tests. I was really impressed. I was thinking like, maybe they go over 3-4 medical tests, but they have a diagnostic interview. And it's they try just to gather information from your side on behavioral history and social interactions. When you are a really young guy, you don't really understand what they're asking for. So it's really tough to manage that kind. And usually are the parents that are speaking on behalf of the kids. But they have also development screening tools. So they have things like a checklist for autism. But I found that you are speaking to the doctor and the doctor is just following a checklist. And I was thinking, wow, what if I could build a service that I use artificial intelligence and I can keep recording your voice as we are speaking. So I look into your face and feeling you more immersive in the conversation we're having, rather than having just someone taking notes and looking down, and it makes it less human, no? I think these kind of things you need to treat it in a more personal way. And thinking on that, it's like, okay, maybe if I can give a checklist, you guys can be talking and you see the questions and you're asking that. And then automatically I'm feeling and creating a profile for you just by having a conversation with someone. But then they have scheduled for the autism diagnostic observation, cognitive and IQ testing. And the thing is growing. And so it was like, wow, it's not just a single thing. Now you can need to build a whole set of tools that you wrap up somehow there. So this is what I'm bringing today as our topic. I was thinking on like 3 domains that we could run over, or something like neurodiverse hub, because there are many things that you need to work to really create that world. And the idea is to decrease the diagnosis from 3 to 5 years, try to do it in less than 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
I have a second one that is mindfulneuro.com, shorter, and then embraceneuro.com.
Well, what was the first one?
Neurodiverse hub.
Oh, neurodiverse hub. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Then
then
the other one is mindful neuro or embrace neuro. You guys can suggest if you think someone
yeah,
like
I have to write it down so I don't forget. That tells you how good the domain name is. No, I'm kidding. Neurodiverse Hub.
Mhm.
There's Hub, and then what was the other one?
mindfulneuro.com,
Mindfulneuro.com, and the third one?
embraceneuro.com. I was trying to
Neuro.com.
think in short names, try to make it clean and easy to remember, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so before we go into like ideas and discussions, I just want to make sure that everyone understands what neurodiversity means. So I looked up the definition, and so neurodiversity is a word that's used to explain the unique ways people's brains work. While everyone's brain develops similarly, no two brains function just alike. And being neurodivergent means having a brain that works differently from the average or neurotypical person. So that was the first one. And then the other one that you mentioned was ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder, right? And then you mentioned ADHD, right?
Yeah. Are the
Attention
most
deficit.
common. There are a wider broad of uh, neurodiverse conditions that you can find, but these are like the two mainly that we usually, or at least I find on this side of my country, is mostly
Mhm.
what people get there.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah,
is
go
this
ahead.
is interesting because so we just had to go through a very similar exercise with my daughter. I'm not going to go into too much details, but I'm very, very intimately familiar with those tests and how that looks. And I had a very similar idea for a slightly different approach, but it definitely sounds interesting. And so ADHD, right, as a diagnosis, is incredibly common. Not just as it's a sure it's a neurodivergent trait, but it's super common as a second kind of I don't know the word, but it starts showing up across a multiple usual diseases, right? If you call it diseases, may not be the right word, right? It's a different neurobehavior.
So it's
So
like manifests itself differently
yeah,
and like across the.
it's a secondary trait, right? So, for example, if you're diagnosed with autism on the spectrum, ADHD can show up, and then ADHD can show up individually, but it can also and often does show up as like a secondary condition.
Okay. So there's like a different root
Yeah.
condition maybe that has like something that has
Yep.
ADHD as a symptom.
Yep.
Mhm. That's
Yep.
what I was
Or
talking about. Sometimes you get just the partial diagnose
yep.
because there are hidden factors that comes with additional things on top. Huh?
And it's incredibly common and incredibly difficult to diagnose because, and this was interesting and news to me as well, like ADHD, right? It's also hyperactivity. So a lot of people that are just starting to understand this will always assume, hey, my kid like doesn't have ADHD, so it's attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of them will say, hey, my kid doesn't have this because they're very still. Maybe they twiddle, like I've got a pick that I play with as we talk, but yeah, that's like if you look at a hyper kid, they are all over the place, right? And that's an incredible, like a very visible symptom. With attention deficit, it's incredibly hard to pick it up, and it can be something as simple as reading slows down, and it's not dyslexia. It's stuff around math, for example, and your working memory and how that cooperates. And one of the interesting tests for it, just kind of for context, you get in school when we used to get like worded assignments with math. Like usually you get an equation like 4 + 5 =, right? So to test ADHD, what they do is they give you an assignment that's slightly longer. Like on a farm there are 4 chickens, and number 4 to denote chickens. They have 2 legs, but that 2 is spelled as a word. So stuff like that is super. That becomes a trigger, and sometimes with ADHD they'll tend to lose focus between those two, and it gets harder to concentrate. So testing for it is incredibly difficult, as Guillermo kind of alluded to, right? That
Even
said,
though I will get also confused if you start mixing numbers and words for numbers.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, and that's the thing, right? It's a spectrum, right? That's the other side of it. It is genuinely a spectrum. But I was going to say that the one thing that, like when we did the tests, that they differed. We got a whole set of like proper, almost an inch thick set of papers to go through. And the doctor kind of said, "All right, you take these, go out, fill them out, and then we'll do a recap after." So it wasn't so
mhm.
much of an interview. It was, here's a set, right?
Yeah, when I think on building a product or a service to try to solve or at least minimize and improve the whole process, there's always the human factor. I think that even whatever we build using artificial intelligence, machine learning, at the end you need a human behind. It's like when doctors know if you have cholesterol, or I can measure that automatically. I can build my script and if give you more milligrams for whatever pill you are taking. But if it hurts your hand, I need to touch you and I
Mm.
need to feel and see you so I know your mass, your weight, and stuff like that. That usually with numbers is quite difficult to diagnose also. And I
Yeah.
think here is also something similar. But at least we can try to improve, for example, the interview process, make it more intimate, more personal. And then over that, what other things we can go and develop. For example, I was thinking on an intelligent mirror. You see that a lot of people build tasks and calendars and things. I was looking on what if I had a camera and I do a sentiment analysis. And if you are really angry, and there's, I know there are exceptions because there are people in the autism spectrum that you don't know if they're how they can smile. It's really
Mhm.
difficult for them to take a smile over. But what if detect that you're angry and I turn you into Hulk, into an avatar? So you see in the screen one of your Marvel heroes getting there. Or if I'm happy and I love Batman, I turn there. But if I'm angry, how I can change that mood so parents can help you. So before you cross the door of your house, we try to change that behavioral. And the second factor is we're trying to solve something here, but I think that the biggest challenge today is society. How you train
Mhm.
society to make this really inclusive. We can help from an individual basis, but I think that the real challenge is how the whole society can work behind to make this successful.
So
Yeah.
is there a like a standardized set of questions or a standardized way to diagnose these? I know there's a spectrum, right? So there's I don't know how many stages or how many levels are there, but it's a, let's say it's very mild, very severe, just for the, right? It's
Yeah.
0, 100, whatever, some numbers, right? But is there what is the determinant factor that says, oh, you fall on the left side of the scale versus you fall on the right? So I'm assuming there is something. So there's probably a set of behaviors, right? That these individuals.
But it's a combination. It's not just the checklist or the questionnaire comes. So they do like some of the physical tests, what Anche was talking about, mathematics problems and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So they come and they have like an average scoring for that. And they come and say, okay, you fall in, let's put in numbers, in
Somewhere,
between
yeah,
two
yeah,
and
yeah.
three, and that kind. What I really don't know and is how it differs between cultures and countries. I don't know
Hmm.
if the checklist is similar in US that it can be in Spain. For example, the signal when you speak with how you say that in English. I always say it in Spanish, but uh, the signal language.
Oh, the sign language.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
ASL.
different.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
It's not
yeah.
a standard thing, and I was really impressed the day I learned about that. They was like, oh, it's not global. It's like, no,
Yeah,
each
that
one.
one is per language, right? There's like
Yes,
an American Sign Language, and it's not. I don't think people can understand themselves between,
Totally.
right? Like,
And that was made me think if it's the same thing here. If it's
oh,
totally
so
different,
the
it's
way
us.
that it get, yeah,
Yeah. How they determine or how they diagnose in
So
which
yeah,
area you are.
the ones that I've seen are fairly standardized. They follow a specific pattern, and the where they do start diverging, no pun intended, is with age. So because they compare, basically what they do is they score the child, if we're talking about kids,
Mhm.
based like comparing them to the peers, right? So how did the peers do in this particular assignment, and how like self
mm.
sufficient or self reliant they are, and so on and so on. So it felt like a fairly standardized score.
So
But
so it's a set of. I mean, since there's a like there's if you talk about kids, younger kids, right? Like adults, there has to be a different set of tools, right? Or questionnaires or scenarios that they go through to determine that, right? So,
yeah,
so I'm assuming for kids, it might be something as uh, observing them, like telling them to do something, right, with toys, right, and then observing them and marking how they did on that, and that's repeated over the same, like the set of kids of the same age and their peer group and everything, and then they see if someone is if the numbers are different, more or less, right? It's not necessarily saying if someone is better or worse, because I don't think there's better or worse in these tests necessarily, right? In some of them,
there
right?
is
In some of them,
yeah,
right?
there is exactly. So it's like this is the median, and you're like above or
Mm-hmm.
below, but it depends, right? With some things it's good, with some things it's not. But
Yeah.
what I was gonna say is, as much as I would love to, like this is my pessimistic side of the brain, but these tests are incredibly difficult, right? They're difficult for the parents, they're difficult for the kids, not necessarily from a physical perspective, but psychological one, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to make them so to do something with AI, you have to have a ton of like be responsible, right? You have to have some sort of committee. Anything that has to do with health, you need a proper committee of people that ensure that this model is properly trained and so on. So it scares me to even think in that direction. But I do want to kind of finish on a high, right? If I look at like neurodiverse hub, I think to the earlier point, there is a societal problem there. There's not necessarily enough resources to understand how to even go about it, how to start testing. Should you be looking at symptoms? Can you look at something specific? Those things, right? And I think there's something to be said about starting to build a community out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And potentially link other neurological divergence right into it.
Yeah.
That could be interesting. So probably, for example, we can use AI to help on the questionnaires to automate and make it more personal. But then you take into account that it's a multidisciplinary team of professionals because you include psychologists, psychiatrists, development, how you say, pediatricians. I need to improve my English a little bit. Speech language pathologist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like how you combine the whole thing, and or maybe we just can help them to make their work much easier, just building the tools for them, and they
Yeah.
take the decision over. No,
Yeah. I mean, to Andrea's point on letting it, putting everything in AI's hands, of
I know
course,
you
like
can.
everyone assumes that this is not a, oh, they'll just do it and parents are not going to care, or the doctors are not going to like be part of it. In the ideal world, if this is trained, right? I mean, I would always see AI as of now, right? Um, as a tool, not as a tool that helps me, not something that replaces me, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So it's like, oh, it's a hammer, right? And we can hammer some nails, right? But I don't want to have like an automatic hammer that just goes and hammers everything, you know? Maybe in some cases you might want to have that, right? But what I'm
Mhm.
trying to say is it's not like, don't just let
No,
it go, right? And it's more of a helping it. And then
yeah.
helping it in a sense, I would make it like, I'm assuming you do this test once, right? Or do it a couple of times in like a month or a couple of month periods. I don't know.
Mhm.
And then you get some number. But do you repeat these tests then yearly to see like how you're okay? So you're repeating these tests yearly.
The period varies depending on the severity. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So it can be most, but yeah. And is this like, do you have to? I'm assuming you have to go to the doctor's office. You have to make an appointment. You have to go there. So it's not a self-administered test or a questionnaire that you can do at home or something like that. So
no.
the value that I would see is if there was a first of all, if there was a way that you can do this at home as a parent, right? Assuming the test is created in that way, right? That's first. And then the second, even if you don't do that, right? Even if you go in to the doctor's office at certain periods, right? Is there anything that you could bring to the doctor in terms of here's a videos that we recorded of our child playing or something. I'm making stuff up,
Mhm.
or them speaking, or them writing, or them, something that would help them make a better treatment, not just, because if you go to the doctor, it's a one-time test, right? So the doctor, the only thing I'm assuming they see is, oh, you did 7.3 last time and now you did 6.5, right? And
So
they
it's
probably
a
do
bit,
they do like an exam, maybe physical exam. I don't know, right? But
it's a bit more complicated than that.
okay.
So this is where it gets tricky, right? This is why I'm saying it sounds scary because it is. So there's a couple things, especially with younger kids. Kids get tired, and when they're tired, they will tend to perform differently.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily a reflection of, let's say, something like ADHD, genuinely just being tired. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
for all of us, right? When we're tired, the difference is we know, and then we have sugar or coffee, and then we feel better for
Mm.
a short amount of time. Kids don't, and then their mental function sort of slows down for whatever reason. So the doctor, what I've seen so far, like we weren't allowed to be there when the test was administered,
Mhm.
right? For very like logical reasons, but um, the doctor has a whole bunch of other stuff there, like times. So they will time how long it took certain things, and that's also part of the assessment. They will they will ask questions that would help the doctor figure out, okay, well, looks like you're tired. Let's do this
Okay.
differently, or let's pause now and we'll resume next time. And for us, this was a session across multiple weeks. So
Oh, okay. So it's
like,
yeah. So it's not like you go
no, no.
there 1 hour. Maybe it is like that for adults.
I would, I mean, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, but I
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
surprised if it is, because it really is. It's not like a set of simple questions, like I said, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the ones for parents we weren't able to do in a short period of time. I mean, we had to
Mhm.
take time, and yeah, it's just it's a difficult thing. So absolutely awesome if there was a way to help. Um,
But
Not sure where yet.
yeah. That's what
We're
that's
not
what.
domain experts on it, right? That's the thing. I think this, when you go to medical, you kind of want to have someone from that profession chime in and say, "Ooh, you know what? If you just built a service where I can show a picture of the test and it would analyze it, I mean, maybe that would
Yeah.
solve a whole bunch of stuff, right? But we don't know."
But for example, recording, you can have kids, young people, adults doing stuff around, and you're recording, and you can identify patterns of muscles and things moving around. That can be a tool that maybe from your eye perspective, you don't fall that unless you've run over 1,000 cases.
Mm.
And now you're used to that. Probably if you can build that kind of tool that can help you
Mm.
identify things, and then you can put your know-how on top of that, that can work.
So that would be more of a tools for the doctors in a way, right? Not this, but so we can separate, right? How could this? What is the help that the doctors would need? That's one
Yeah.
thing. I don't think I personally can speak towards that. I have no idea, right? What they're missing, right? And then there's the other end of what can you do to help parents, right? What is something that as a parent you wish it could be better, right? Different, faster, whatever, cheaper, whatever the attributes are. And then, I mean, I don't know, depending on the age of the child, right? You could theoretically ask them, how is that easier? How can you make it easier on them? But that might be very hard, right?
But the problem is, if you ask a child, they don't realize
Yeah,
what
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's very hard
Yeah.
to figure
There-
out,
there-
right?
Again, it comes with a whole set of complexities because
Yeah.
there's also things that like the guidelines and suggestions on how to communicate this with the kid and what not to say and so on. You know, the basic fundamental thing is they'll develop. So what we heard, right? Kids will develop coping mechanisms, as will adults. So something like an ADHD diagnosis isn't necessarily problematic in the long run, and it potentially can get better by kids developing their own coping mechanisms. But it's one of those things. So this helping the parents is really interesting, right? Because how can you, as a parent, help focus on maybe developing those coping mechanisms, seeing them, understanding them? There's a lot there. Perhaps if we do want to go down the AI path, like, is there a way for us to identify coping mechanisms, right? And say, well, it looks like your kid is doing this, which seems like a coping mechanism, so you can try more of this, right?
Okay. Yeah, so basically, yeah. But I think we agree, right? Of the three, and I have a fourth one, right? Fourth angle. So we said doctor, parents, kids, and then the community, right, would be the fourth one, right? What could be, how can someone, right, who has no clue of, I mean, how to deal, how to like do all these, not
Yeah.
necessarily cope is not a right word, right? But how do people get more like familiarized with this so they're not like
Yeah, because
deer in the headlights when they encounter someone, right, like that
think,
on the spectrum, maybe, right?
think that people usually tends to judge without knowing the context. And when something
Of
is
course.
something that is not in your patterns, and you're just like, what the heck just happened? Uh, you tend to just get your own opinion on that, but you have no clue
Yeah.
of the whole thing there. And I have a friend that his kid has ADHD, and sometimes he's like spontaneously does something that is like, what the heck?
Yeah.
What he thought to make that happen? No, what triggered there to boom and say, and they did. We had a situation that was really bit tough because he almost fall from 5 meters tall, so he could have uh, big injuries there. But he was not uh, conscient of the danger of his action. He just went and did it, boom, and it almost failed from the top. And it was
Yeah.
like, oh gosh. So I guess that's, yeah, it's really complex topic. That's why we're discussing this. Otherwise, someone would just have come and build the service and the product.
Yeah, yeah.
So here's a thought, right? Because I'm kind of hearing right all the words, right? Listening to this, thinking about challenges that we are facing as parents. There's another thing. It's not a community as like let's save the whole world, but there's a fifth option. There is a community revolving around every single child that is incredibly important in their development, and that is their school. So it is their teacher, people very close to your child, like if you have a babysitter or if you have other like tutors, anything like that, right? So maybe one of those domains, let's say Embrace Neuro or something like that, could become not a hub for the whole world, but something that you can say, hey, my child has this particular, neurodiversity challenge, and I want to bring people that are near to this child into this circle, right? And then you can share tips on how to deal with it. So it's less about us trying to find ways of helping diagnose and so on. It's more, hey, parents, here's a tool where you can securely, safely help bring people on board in a way that really helps your kid, right? For example, I would love to do that with so we have like the grandparents, obviously. I mean, you talk, it's fine, But if they have some way of going somewhere and reading through a few things, maybe some of them will be more curious than others, reading articles and stuff. Especially teachers in schools, as you go through that system, right? It becomes incredibly difficult. And then any other, like, you send your kid to camp, you get a whole new set of people there that don't know how to deal with this. Maybe they don't know that sometimes it's not okay to let them go on a 5-meter pole.
Yeah. Even though it might be safe for everyone else or whatever, right?
Yeah, but they'll forget. I mean, they'll think of something else and they'll be like, "Oh, well, I'll just do that." Right?
And I see that fear from the parents that
Yep.
they would not allow their kids to sleep in a friend's house because of
Yep.
what we
whatever.
can do
Yeah.
if we are not in front. And usually it doesn't happen too much, to be honest, because I had that experience that bring people at home, and I know they are more active than my kids and stuff. And you try, oh, let's watch a movie, let's get popcorns and stuff, and you handle that. But it's true on that parents that say, hey, there's no problems, because sometimes they try to put that barrier to protect, which is fair, and that's what parents usually we want to protect our kids, but also giving some kind of freedom. If you have the pattern or the activities to make that integration, would be really, really good. Huh?
So the first thing that popped to my mind as you guys were talking about that is, it might sound harsh, but user manual.
Yeah.
Right? In a way, you're giving people a manual, right? And hey, this is what this is. This is like these are the things that you should be careful. But things are tailored to that specific person, right? It's not like, I mean, you can Google and you can find I'm assuming, checklists,
but people don't have
tips
the time
and
to do that,
tricks,
right?
and yeah. But even if you find it, what I'm trying to say is like maybe your child isn't really exhibiting behaviors A, B, and C, right? Maybe they're exhibiting C and D or whatever, G and F.
Yeah.
But that would be pretty much tailored to your child, right? Specifically, right? It would be very specific and personalized. Yeah, I like that idea. It's almost like a education. It is an educational material, but it's not a generic educational material. It's a very tailored to that specific person. Hey, when you're doing this, make sure you're like, keep an eye on that kid because of whatever, right? Because they tend to do that, right? Because they don't know, like that's how they are, pretty much, right?
And you can go one step further and say, hey, can you report this to me, right? If you see this behavior, just
exactly. Yeah. And then you can just do the yeah. So it's not just one way, it's also a way to communicate back, like, oh, we haven't exhibit, like the child didn't exhibit any of these behaviors today or whatever, right? Or they exhibited this different behavior that was like unexpected or not part of the norm, air quotes, I guess.
And this does become valuable when you go to the physician again, right? Because then you do have a log of, and you can kind of go, hey, we've exposed our kid to these circumstances, right? And these things happened. And then you can start seeing patterns. So one of the advice that, for example, we got is that don't stop exposing the child to circumstances that would potentially be
triggering or
triggering.
Yeah.
You have to be careful, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But like, I'm not going to force her. So again, I wouldn't force her to do, like, if it's ADHD, I wouldn't force her to do mathematics tests all the time, right? It makes no sense.
Yeah. But you're not going to stop it either completely,
exactly,
right?
Yeah. So there's, I mean, it goes to other things, and this is why the whole personalization or personalized user manual for this neurodivergent.
I don't like calling it a user manual, but that's the first thing that came to my mind, right? It's a horrible name for it,
but
it
describes it incredibly well, right? It is
exactly.
A customizable or very, very personalized set of introductions to this neurodiverse issue that this person is experiencing, right? And it helps their inner circle understand and like help.
Yeah. And if you want to take it, like if you like, I know it's so it's harder to talk about children, right? When these things are. But let's, if we move it to adults, right? One thing that popped to my mind is, hey, I could write down a, air quotes again, user manual of how I work best with people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trivial, like a simple example is, hey, don't call me because I'm not going to answer your call. Send me a text message, for example, right? Or don't say hi and then wait for me to respond. Just say hi and tell me what you want. You know, these are very banal and very, you know, simple things, but
no, but they
I
make
could
sense,
probably
right?
come up with 10 of the things that I prefer, the way that I prefer to work, right? And it's not necessarily, you could call it neurodiversity or whatever, right? I don't know. I've never been diagnosed. I don't know. Maybe, bless you. Maybe
Thank you.
maybe I am on the spectrum. I don't know. But I think everyone, call it quirks, whatever you want to call it at this point, right? If you want. But,
so here's a fun one, right? Sorry to kind of cut you off, but this is a great, and I profusely apologize to everyone, but it's a great monetization strategy because here's the thing. I think, Guillermo, you mentioned the number, but basically, I would argue almost everybody has at least something, right?
I think so.
And
Totally.
ADHD is on the rise. And for example, working with someone who has ADHD does require some sort of accommodations. None of it is incredibly like obscene, right? Maybe they just prefer having meetings with a clear agenda. And I know like everybody's going to go, hey, I prefer meetings with, yes, we all do. But for someone with severe ADHD, it's actually super, super bad if it's not there because it can also trigger anxiety. Which leads me to say, if you go there and you create this personalizable introduction to yourself and your like neurodivergency, this can be exposed to HR. But in a very, very good way in terms of like, hey, this is a good set of things that you can roll out across your company that will help everybody on your workforce cooperate
work together well. Yeah.
So you go into this diversity and inclusion, not from a perspective of let's single this person out because they're ADHD or have something else and now they want to ask for accommodations. But it's like, all right, HR has a centralized way getting all this data, and then you collect and collate a set of requests and accommodations that they can roll out.
That's a good operating manual is the word, not the user manual.
What
Operating manual. I don't know if it's getting worse or not, but but yeah, just to go back to like, I think it applies to like employees in a company, but I was thinking more like children in school, right? If you would collect all the data and if you had, air quotes, operating manual for each student, right? We're not singling people out here, right? How would that impact the way that you administer like knowledge tests to those children, right? Like you mentioned, some people have trouble like reading the numbers versus getting like an actual equation 4 + 5 = something, right? What if you would tailor those tests or tailor those knowledge tests that best suits their way of thinking and doing stuff, right? I'm not saying simplify it, right? Because it's not necessarily simplifying it, right? It's figuring out what are you actually testing here. There is place for like textual questions, of course there is, right? But if you're just testing the ability of someone, you're testing the multiplication ability, right? In math, let's say, you don't have to have it in text. Maybe you have 2 questions in text, right? But have everything else in a format that person prefers, I guess.
So they do that. They do. So at least in Slovenia, right? Schools do that. The requirement for that to happen is to go through a diagnosis and then get a formal like a specific set, and then you send it to the school, and the school evaluates it and so on, and then the what do we call it? Pediatric psychologists at the school will say, okay, well, I will assess, and maybe this will mean that tests for math will be administered separately in a different room so that this child has like focus, or we'll do more oral instead of written exams. It is genuinely a thing. So yeah, basically the TLDR, right? Yes, it would be useful to have an operating manual for this, precisely for that reason, because you want to share it with the people that spend honestly more time with your kid than you do.
Yeah.
And yeah, also when we go down to kids, what I see, for example, in my kids' school, that if you have attention deficit or autism spectrum, they're integrated in the classroom with the kids. And for example, my middle kid, he usually makes his homework and stuff that he's asked to quite fast, and then he spends rest of the time helping his peer that has this autism spectrum, and helps him to understand things. And sometimes the teacher tells us it's like it's quite surprising to see how they really understand each other and how he's helping and supporting without having that operating manual. So I think that the operating manual comes for elder people, for
Yes.
Yeah,
adults.
I mean, but if you think about it, it in a way it is an operating manual for kids as well. It's just it has to be explained differently, right? Maybe you explain to your kid, hey, that like that other kid that he has maybe he's harder to understand these things because of this, and this is how you can help him, right? You're still giving your kid instructions, I guess, or explaining it to them. It's not a PDF that they'll read,
No, but
right?
it is
But
there. So it is a set of instructions. So I don't know how much time you've spent, Guillermo, with your kid, explaining what autism is, and how you kind of, if you're supposed to do anything special and so on, right?
Yeah.
But my assumption is you did. Am I wrong?
Yes. No, I try to speak to them that not everybody's
Yep.
brain works the same way, not even my brain. And we talk about different things, but there's, for example, compulsive
Yep.
disorder. You see my room right now, maybe there are people that is listening doesn't see it, but I have like a organized chaos.
Yep.
I know where
everyone does.
I know where my things are, but my wife, for example, she wants to have everything really
Mm.
organized. And sometimes she jumps, and she has learned over the years, after 25 years of being together, that if you touch and move something in my room, I get completely
Yep.
lost. And it's something like, but the funny thing is that, for example, myself, when I travel, I'm really organized. Everything I'm in the hotel room is these things go here, this
Yeah.
way,
Has
this
to be that way,
size. I
right?
put things in that. Yeah,
Mhm.
because it's the way of I don't want to forget anything here. No,
Yep.
Yeah.
and
There's a
maybe
different goal, right? There's a
Well,
different
but
goal
it's
there.
triggered by a very, very similar thing, right? So, for example, like I think we can safely say two out of the three people here then have some sort of um, neurodiversity, right? It doesn't have to be
I
extreme,
guess
but
so.
for me,
Yeah.
it's very similar. Like I prefer the same brand of hotels and so on because everything's the same, and I don't have to relearn things, right? And
Oh yeah, that's what I like as well. Like
yeah, but
I don't like new
so
stuff.
yeah, but okay. So the question is,
I go out of my way. Like I go out of my way to get a hotel that I want. I go out of my way to pick a specific seat on an
yeah,
airplane that I want to
yeah,
sit in. Like there was a year when I was traveling a couple of times monthly, and I would sit in 23A every time.
yeah. So
Yeah. Or
It,
when you go to the supermarket, I always go to the same one because I know the
the
aisles
layout, and when
and
they
I know
change
how
it,
all hell
how
breaks
when
loose.
they change the
All hell.
layout,
Yeah.
that's the problem, right?
I get really stressed and
Now
nervous.
this is what I was going
Yep.
to say. The key thing, the key differentiator is the level of anxiety it causes you, right?
True. Yeah.
But the point is, right, if we go back for a second, you spoke with your kid. And for example, with like our diagnosis, we also want to speak with kids, or preferably, we would like to empower their parents to speak to the kids that are close to ours in a way where, not everybody's going to go and research this. Like you have to, this is it's tough to say, right? But some people genuinely will go and say, okay, this is a challenge. I've never seen this before. I'm going to go and go on Bing, Microsoft Represent, or Google or somewhere and read up on what this means and how to approach this, right? My partner is very similar to this. Like she will go and buy all the books about it, literally everything. She's reading, I don't know how many books about this now. Not all people do this in shock news, right?
Yeah.
So giving them
Yeah.
a set
At
of
first.
starting points to have those things is going to be super powerful for your kid if we're just focusing on.
So it's almost making it even more meta is you need resources for parents first on how they can think about this and how they can learn about it, maybe. And then you have the, like, some, as you said, someone wants to learn and read 10 books
Yeah.
about it. Some people are like, no, 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 just give me what I have to do, what I have to know, right? And these are the things that you have to know. And these are the things how you can prepare this set of operating manuals, for the lack of a better word, right?
Yeah.
Follow these steps, and this is how you can prepare this. That, like, this is how you capture this information, because this will be useful to
Yes.
teachers, right? Capture that and help them capture that information, and then of course share it, right? Share it with trusted people, and then have the ability for that trusted people to provide feedback in a sense of, oh, we observed these behaviors, or we observed this new behavior. And by collecting that, that helps you as well as your, like, pediatrician, your doctor, right? It helps as an additional, like, hey, this is what we observed, right? Because you're not going to be 100% of your time with your kid, right? Maybe you'll remember it, but you're not going to know what happened 6 hours when they were in school, maybe, right?
And how you manage that reinforcement learning? Because at the end, it's something that you cannot do it a single time, that you need to reinforce so it gets. Unfortunately, there's a part of society that is very selfish and with a lot of lack of empathy that will say, I don't care, it's not my problem. But it's like, guys, at some point you might face this, because I start thinking that this is the norm. It's like 20 years ago, there were not methodologies and tests that could identify. It's like, you say colon irritable. How you say?
What?
Sorry, what now?
There's a disease 20 years ago, when you had issues that you go 20 times to the
Oh,
bath because
IBS,
everything you eat.
irritable bowel
Oh, I
syndrome.
irritable, yeah,
IBS.
irritable bowel
Irritable.
syndrome. Yeah.
It was going in the same bag, no matter if you gluten, lactose, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But now there are ways to identify. It's like, oh, you were not that. You are intolerant to lactose.
Something, yeah. Oh, so it's the advancement of everything, of testing, allows
Yes.
us to, like, yeah. As you said, I wouldn't be surprised in like 5 to 10 years from now, everyone will be on some sort of a spectrum, or already is. They just don't know it yet,
Mhm.
right? So you already is, and everyone has the, as we said, hotel rooms, these, that, those things. Everyone has those. I'm calling them quirks, but there might not be quirks, but
Again,
everyone does
it's the
something like
level of
that.
anxiety that it causes.
Yes,
where
that's the exactly. Yeah. Like, you might be checking that you locked your door whenever you exit your apartment. Check it twice, right? But the question is how upset and how much anxiety will that cause you if you remember it 3 hours later and you're not at home,
And
More we are
right?
speaking, more I'm thinking I need to go and do some tests, because that thing of locking things, the door, ensuring the car is locked, and
Yeah.
20 times click till you see
Yep.
the lights.
Yep.
It's
yeah, so OCD is
Yeah.
a spectrum as well, right? It's one of those things that I know we looked into for other reasons, but it's interesting because some people will have, like, when we say OCD, they will go and turn on a light switch 20 times before they can go into the
Oh
room.
yeah. Yeah.
Without
Because
fail,
it's 20 times. It
it
has to be
has to
20
be 20
times, and
times.
that's it. Yeah.
And they just
Yeah.
cannot function if it's not 20 times. And that's like severe, debilitating OCD, right? But then on the other side, I get severe anxiety if I'm not on an aisle seat. This is a fun fact about me, right? But it genuinely is bad.
So 23C, not 23A. That's what
I
you're
have to
saying.
be in the seat. Well, with Slovenian planes, right? You might remember
Well,
them.
depending.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a B or a,
Yeah.
well, but C is almost always okay.
Yeah.
But
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it does become an issue. Anyway, sorry, we digress. So I this is something for me specifically really close to my heart, and I know I'm going to go and build something very similar to this. In fact, I mean, self-promotion 101 here, but I am starting up a charity or a nonprofit for one of those things. So maybe this is one of those ideas that I can steal for myself, or steal with the help of all of you, and build. But
Sure.
having something like this, I know that building something like this for parents of kids with neurodiversity challenges is incredibly empowering and incredibly impactful. And then, yeah, of course, I mean, selfishly, it's like you can extend it very easily to actually be applicable, and like can generate some revenue, if you move it into the HR and professional spectrum, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
start with like your main purpose, societal impact, sounds really good.
Yeah.
I always
Yeah.
say that we are
Yep.
privileged people that work in high tech, and we should use our know-how to make a better society.
Yep.
So
This
these
would.
kind of things, I'm totally on board on how we can solve or try to minimize or make a better way for parents and childs to be more integrated in society.
Well, that sounds like the thing we need to build then.
Hmm.
All right. I mean, we're in agreement. So 3 domains. Uh,
Hub can be for community.
yeah.
Embrace can be more on the educational side.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
No?
embrace
Or just one that offers everything, right?
embrace speaks to me, embraceneuro.com, because it's like, if you share this with other parents, like I would go like, hey, this is Embrace Neuro.
Mhm.
It's easy. It's I don't want to say fun, but it's inviting, right? It's telling you it's okay. You can be
Yes.
acceptant of it.
Yeah.
Feels
Yeah.
Yeah,
open,
exactly.
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the first thing that you could do is, if you want to bring this up in a weekend, I'm not saying
Yep.
it just takes a weekend, but collection of best resources that helped
Yep.
you, right? Start that as a community, maybe, right? And say, here are the end resources that helped me, and this is how I manage this and how I embraced it, right? And then have
Yeah.
others,
Yeah.
instead of going into and building questionnaires and I don't know what,
I'm
right?
Or
smirking.
have
I'm
like a
smirking
grid with
here.
movies, books.
Yes, yeah, movies, books, all the resources, right?
Sorry. I said I was smirking because this reminds me of episode 1. Because, right, you're going through a set of things like articles and so on, and then you're saving those and you're saying, help me. If you like, for those of you that remember or don't remember, we said, here's an AI tool that helps you rewrite articles, right? Blog posts or something.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
yeah.
similar, right? You could go and say, hey, write this in the like words of a 10-year-old child, right? And
Hmm.
suddenly you're going, okay, how do I explain neurodiversity to a 10-year-old child? So we're back to that whole the first idea, the thing, like,
Oh, yeah,
episode
yeah, yeah,
one,
yeah.
in building it in this, right? But it,
I was thinking on the summary, saying, "Oh, there are a lot of papers, long
yep,
docs. Just give me a summary of the main key points
yep,
that I just can pick and start
yeah,
applying."
but
Yeah, but it's also saying, here's a text for you adults
yeah,
to read, and then you saying, well, now tell me, how do I explain
use these
this
words for your ten
to a
year old kid.
10-year
Yeah,
old, or rewrite
yeah,
this so a 10-year-old can read it and understand it for themselves.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a kind of combination. Okay, yeah, makes sense.
So
Yeah, episode 1 was
yeah,
contentjoy.io.
yeah, we have to build
Yeah,
contentjoy.io first, build this one on top, and then connect the two. So we've got
yeah,
2 weekends.
And even I was thinking that parents can read and can have a
Mm,
summary, but turn that rather than how you tell this to a kid of 10 years, create a movie with animated cartoon, your
yeah,
favorite characters,
yeah, yeah.
showing
That
the use case.
explains
yeah.
this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That visually, they will retain more of the
Yeah,
information than really reading
Well, so
yeah,
here's
or
the fun
getting.
one, right? This depends on how neurotypical their brain is. Again,
Hmm.
some kids will be more susceptible actually to reading, and some kids will be more susceptible to like comic books, and then some to movies. So yeah, I mean, it just underscores the whole thing. Having a mechanism of saying, "Hey, I want to like present this in a different way. Super powerful, right?
So we can adapt based on the spectrum level that
Yep.
you are. Put it as a movie, put it as a book, comics.
Yeah. No,
So that could be wow. Yeah.
I think it's really powerful. Like I said, I mean, this is something that I've been trying to build, and I've been thinking about doing this for a couple months now. And I'm genuinely starting up a nonprofit, going the whole 9 yards, proper legal entity and everything, so that I can build
Mhm.
a tool for something very, very close to this. Which is why I'm so confident in saying, hey, this would genuinely help parents, right? This would be really, really good. And yeah,
And the fun part is that we didn't prepare this.
yeah,
We just came without speaking, and there are more things in common than what we thought. Huh?
no, this is
And I think that's why we brought all three of us together.
yeah, this is going to be one of those. It's a fun episode, right? I think turning out to be interesting. But okay, so I mean, now we have to think how we're going to build this, right? I think we should talk about at least. I know, let's mark this clip just so Peter knows when he's editing. There we go. Welcome back.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Let's mark it again. So when I go back. This will be super, super impactful, right? It genuinely can be. So the question is, how do you build it, and how do you start with an MVP, right? I think that's our next like a segue into the next start.
Yeah, I think you could go from multiple angles. If we mentioned the first episode, right, where we were thinking about the idea, that definitely takes longer, right, to get off the ground. However, having a place where you could actually start collecting resources, right, like the best resources that you found, that you helped you, and in a way start building a community already, right? And then you come out with this tool, right, that can help this community of people, right? That's how I would go about it, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't do it in parallel, right? But if you're the only person working on it, I would start with the content first, right, and have that, because you'll always have to have that anyway, right?
You do. The only question there I have is so two things on my mind, right? Do you start with the content, or alternatively, you start with your the individual's profile that is kind of shareable, right? So can you start building out the profile, and you're saying, hey, this is this person. These are the traits that they have that I want you to know about, and then having a way of sharing that with individuals in a limited way, and you start with that, right?
That would work. That would work as well. Is there a way that you could standard? I feel like you would have to maybe standardize it, and so by standardize I mean let's take.
You will need to group the content, because if you want to do it that way, it's based on your profile. This is the content or the different blogs that you pull different information and you feed back to that profile.
Yeah, like if you think about corporate setting, right, is like one section would be, this is how I prefer to do meetings, right? That's one. The second one would be, this is how you can contact me, or the ways that I prefer to be contacted. I'm making these up, right? Is there a need for something to be grouped or categorized like this, or standardized like this? So you could have, so I could go on a website and I could look at your profile and I'll be like, oh yeah, I know how to work with this person. Not because I know how they operate, but also because we work well together in terms of we match together on these like certain things. We both enjoy being on time for meetings or not moving meetings around, right? And stuff like that. That's 33% of this group here, but
I saw that one coming a mile away.
I was preparing for it. But the question is, does it have to be like grouped or categorized like that? I mean, you could figure out these groups for corporate setting. I don't know how you would figure that out for hey, I'm a human. Here's my operating instructions.
Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, think of your daily, think of your day, right? What are the things that you do? So it's going to be Actually, no. Let's restart. If you look at a kid, if we focus on kids and they go to school, right? It's going to be interaction with peers. So anything to do with interaction with peers. Maybe they're frightful. Maybe they're trusting. Maybe they're maybe they're too gullible, right? And you have to be careful. So that's one. Two is like teaching or learning. Sorry, more specifically, learning. So how do they learn? How do they prefer to learn? Do they prefer like lots of repetition? Do they prefer this X, Y, Z? Playtime. So it's not just interaction as such, but like playtime. Do they prefer more isolated play or non-isolated, like lots of parents or so on? Fear, how to deal with like how to cope with a fearful child, for example. If they get scared of something, how do you deal with this? Like if one of those things that we can also talk about is anxiety, right? Anxiety is quite a big thing again. And if you have a kid with severe anxiety or something that triggers severe anxiety, and for example, it's fear of the dark, and not the Iron Maiden song in this case, but the actual fear of the dark. How do parents, when you go on a sleepover or when you send your kid on a sleepover, how will the other parent know how to deal with this?
Yeah. So there looks like there are like common situations, right? That you could come out, especially when talking about kids, as in corporate setting as well, right? But I'm saying we can't generalize it, right? Like if I'm not in a corporate setting, I'm not going to create a profile for myself, right? To share it with you. Maybe the way that I would share it with you guys is I would say, hey, I like, when we're on time, when we're this, when we're that, right? But it's not like, oh, I like my, I don't know, meat well done or whatever it is. I don't know, is that there's no generic things, but definitely for like school setting, right? Or sleepovers. Maybe there's like different, sleepovers. These are the things that come up at sleepovers that might be problematic or you have to pay attention, right? Or school.
I was thinking back on what Ange was talking about school, and we focus on kids. No, what are the different blocks before they get into school? That time that they need to interact on class, between breaks, between class, when they go to the canteen, which is a total different. Even though you are interacting with your peers, having a mass of different classes and different ages can become really stressful. So maybe you can break that into like 6 different stages, but just for the time of being at school. And maybe we could focus just on that area, because other factors are so random it will be really difficult to find like
a I mean, you could add some common ones later on if you want to, right? Oh, a sleepover. Here are the 5 common things that your kid might encounter when they're at a sleepover, right? But school would be closer to the standardized thing that you could do is like, when they arrive at school, as you said, during the class, after the class, breaks, lunch, whatever it is, right?
It's a fixed scenario.
Yes. Yeah. It's a fixed, it's X amount of times, and it's more or less the same. And then you can figure it out based on the subjects, right? You could say, at the math class, this whatever, right? Be careful for that or something.
It's interesting because you said, I wouldn't necessarily go and create this for myself, right? Here's a counterpoint. Well, let's say you're a speaker and you attend lots of conferences, and you are neurodivergent, right? It doesn't have to be extreme, but maybe you prefer that people don't talk to you before a presentation, and having that kind of profile that you can share with like the organizers and say, hey, here's a thing, like I have a thing. Can you please read this? And just here's the basic set of things that I would like to ask you to do, right?
Makes sense. Yeah. But again, that's the way that I see it, that I see that as a corporate thing in a way, right? Like I'm not going to create a profile with me and then like hand it out to people on the street. You know?
Yeah, no, it's not
It's
a
a
Twitter profile.
well known. Yeah. It's a well known situation, or like well known situations to me that are important enough for me to share it. Right. If I think it's important for me to people not talk to me at conferences, I'll make sure to bring it up, right?
Yep.
And I've seen conferences do that as well.
Yep,
Up to like they have like those stickers,
Yeah.
right? That all talk to me, don't talk to me, or get away, or whatever the levels that they have,
But
right?
can we agree? So I think we are kind of agreeing, right? We're focusing on one group, and let's say that those are kids for now, because it's easier to then define these common scenarios, or at least a standardized set of scenarios, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So the MVP then we would literally say, all right, so there's two options. One is we start with the profile itself, and start defining traits that would characterize those particular scenarios, right? And then option two, or maybe in parallel or straight after, is start adding content to those particular scenarios as well, or content that applies to those particular scenarios.
Yeah. So it's like come up with a structure, come up with the categories, give people the ability to fill it out, because in a way it is a form, right? For now, if you think about it, right? And then have the ability to share that safely with someone, right? That would be, I think, a good, and have an ability for them to provide feedback back and say, yes, this had this day, this hour, or whatever it has, or this day, end of the day, they fill it out, right? All right, that's sounds good. All right, we're at the 1 hour mark, so this was a little bit different from the other two episodes, but definitely interesting. Definitely, there's a lot of potential here, and a lot of potential to do good first, right? And then worry about monetization and whatnot later. I feel like something like this, idea like this, would be easy to monetize later on, assuming it does a lot of good that we talked about. All right, guys. Oh, it was nice talking to you. We'll see you for episode 4, I guess, next time.
Awesome.
Take care.
All right. Bye.